The salvage ship Dusty Horizon moved slowly through the darkness of space. Around it, pieces of broken ships floated in every direction. Some pieces were as small as a human hand. Others were as large as buildings. The debris field stretched for thousands of kilometers, a graveyard of alien warships that told the story of a battle unlike any other in human history. Stood at the observation window on the ship's upper deck. He held a cup of coffee in his hands, but he had forgotten to drink it. The liquid had grown cold long ago. His eyes moved across the wreckage outside, trying to understand what had happened here. 3 weeks ago, humanity had faced extinction. A fleet of warships, more than 2,000 vessels strong, had entered the solar system. They were a species that humans had only learned about 6 months earlier. They were conquerors. They moved from system to system, harvesting intelligent species for food and labor. Earth was supposed to be their next meal. Humanity had nothing that could stop them. The Terran coalition had built a respectable fleet over the past century of space exploration, but their ships were designed for defense against pirates and small conflicts. They were not built to fight an invasion force of 2,000 alien warships, each one larger and more powerful than anything humans had ever created. The coalition had prepared for the end. Emergency bunkers were filled with civilians. Last messages were recorded. Soldiers said goodbye to their families. Everyone knew that the battle would be short and the outcome would be certain. But then something unexpected happened. A single entity had appeared from nowhere. Sensors had barely detected it before it moved. It was humanoid in shape, roughly 8 feet tall, covered in armor that seemed to shift and change color as it moved. It had torn through the fleet like a wolf through sheep. Ships that could destroy cities were ripped apart with bare hands. Weapons that could crack planets were swatted aside like insects. In less than 6 hours, the entire invasion fleet was destroyed. Every single ship, every single soldier. The entity had killed them all, and then it had disappeared into the debris field it had created. Now, 3 weeks later, was here to find out what that entity was. Was not a soldier. He had never wanted to be one. He was an engineer, and he believed that was the most important job anyone could have. Soldiers destroyed things. Engineers built them. Engineers fixed them. Engineers made life better for everyone around them. At 34 years old, had spent 15 years fixing things that other people said could not be fixed. He had rebuilt atmospheric processors on Mars when everyone said they were too damaged to save. He had repaired quantum drives in the middle of deep space with nothing but spare parts and determination. He had earned a reputation throughout the Terran coalition as someone who could solve impossible problems. His called him Miracle Hands. He did not like the nickname, but he understood why they used it. There had been many times when he had fixed something that should not have been fixable. There had been many times when his work had saved lives. That was why he was here. The coalition wanted to understand the entity that had saved them. They wanted to know where it came from, who made it, and whether it would help them again if another threat appeared. Was supposed to find it, study it, and if possible, communicate with it. He had not expected to find it in pieces. The door behind him opened, and he heard footsteps approaching. He did not turn around. He knew who it was from the sound of the steps. Was 23 years old, the youngest member of his technical team. She had graduated at the top of her class from the Coalition Academy, specializing in sensor analysis and alien technology. She was smart, eager, and sometimes too quick to speak her mind. Liked her. She stopped beside him and looked out the window at the debris field. "It is hard to believe one thing did all this," she said quietly. Nodded. They had 2,000 ships. Our entire fleet could not have stopped them, but something out there destroyed them in 6 hours. Do you think it is still alive, the entity? That is what we are here to find out. Was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Sir, we have found something unusual on the long-range sensors. I think you should come see it." Finally turned away from the window. He set his cold coffee on a nearby table and followed through the ship's corridors. The dusty Horizon was not a large vessel. It was designed for salvage operations, with a crew of 42 and enough cargo space to hold several tons of recovered materials. It was practical and functional, not comfortable or impressive. The sensor room was located near the center of the ship, protected by multiple layers of hull plating. 4 technicians worked at various stations, monitoring the space around them, led to her own station and pointed at the display. "There," she said, "do you see it?" Leaned closer to the screen. At first, he saw only the usual chaos of the debris field. Broken hull sections, drifting engines, pieces of weapons that would never fire again. But then he noticed something different. Among all the dead metal, there was a life sign. "That is not possible," said slowly. "Everything out there should be dead. The battle was 3 weeks ago." "I know, but the readings are clear. Something out there is alive, or at least something is giving off energy patterns that look like life signs." Studied the data more carefully. Was right. The readings were unusual. They did not match any known species in the Coalition database. They did not match the ether. The energy patterns were complex, almost like a heartbeat, but operating on frequencies that human technology barely understood. "Can you get a visual?" he asked. Worked at her console for a few moments. The main display changed, showing an image of the area where the life signs were coming from. His breath caught in his throat. Floating among the wreckage was a figure. It was humanoid in shape, roughly 8 feet tall, just as the battle reports had described. Its body was covered in armor that seemed to flow like liquid metal, shifting between silver and blue as the light touched it. Intricate patterns covered its surface, lines and shapes that pulsed with a faint blue glow. But the glow was weak. It flickered like a candle in the wind, and could see why. The entity was damaged, badly damaged. Great tears had been ripped through its armor, exposing internal structures that sparkled with dying light. One of its arms was missing completely, torn away at the shoulder. Its chest was partially open, revealing crystalline shapes that barely flickered with energy. A dark substance leaked from multiple wounds, spreading into the vacuum around it like blood in water. "It is dying," said. "Or it is already dead, and we are just seeing the last of its power fading away," replied. Shook his head. "No, look at the pattern of those energy readings. They are too regular, too organized. Whatever that thing is, it is still fighting. It is still trying to survive." He straightened up and made a decision. "Get me Chief. I want a full technical team assembled in the cargo bay. We are going to bring that thing aboard." Stared at him. "Sir, with respect, we have no idea what that entity is. It destroyed 2,000 warships. If it wakes up and decides we are a threat, it could tear this ship apart with its bare hands." "It saved humanity," said simply. "It could have ignored it could have let them destroy Earth and moved on to wherever it was going, but it did not. It chose to fight for us. It chose to protect us." He looked back at the image on the screen. "Now it needs help, and I am going to help it." Opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. She had worked with long enough to know that tone of voice. When he made a decision like this, nothing would change his mind. "I will get the Chief," she said quietly and left the room. Stayed behind, staring at the image of the wounded entity. It floated alone in the darkness, surrounded by the corpses of the enemies it had killed. He wondered if it was conscious. He wondered if it knew that help was coming. He wondered what it would think of the humans who were trying to save it. Chief Petty Officer Daniel arrived in the cargo bay 10 minutes later. He was an older man, 62 years old, with a beard and a face that showed every year of his 30 years in service. He had seen things that would break younger men, and he had survived them all, trusted him completely. Behind came 6 more engineers, all hand-picked for this mission. They were the best the Coalition had to offer. If anyone could figure out how to help the entity, it was this team. "So," said, his voice rough and dry. "We are really doing this. We are bringing an alien weapon that killed 2,000 ships onto our little salvage vessel." "It is not a weapon," replied. "It is a protector. There is a difference." The probably did not see much difference. There were invaders who wanted to eat humanity. I do not feel sorry for them. Grunted but said nothing more. He began organizing the team, assigning tasks and checking equipment. Appreciated that about the old man. He might complain, but he always did his job. The recovery operation took 4 hours. They used the cargo bay's gravity manipulators to carefully capture the entity and guide it through the ship's main doors. It was delicate work. The entity was heavy, far heavier than something its size should be, and its damaged structure was fragile. One wrong move could cause more harm. When they finally had it inside, resting on the cargo bay floor, got his first close look at what they had found. It was beautiful. Even damaged, even dying, the entity was the most impressive thing had ever seen. Its armor was covered in script that no human language could read. The patterns etched into its surface were not just decorative. Could tell, with an engineer's instinct, that they served a purpose. They were part of its systems, its structure, its very being. The crystalline shapes inside its open chest were unlike anything in human technology. They were not circuits or processors in any traditional sense. They were something else entirely, something that operated on principles did not understand. "What do you think it is?" asked. She had followed them to the cargo bay and now stood beside, staring at the entity with wide eyes. "I do not know," admitted, "but I intend to find out." He knelt beside the entity and began to examine its wounds more closely. The damage was extensive. Whatever had hurt it, probably the weapons of the ships in their final desperate moments, had torn through systems that could barely comprehend. But he could see patterns in the destruction. He could see how things had once been connected. He could see, however dimly, how they might be fixed. "The main problem is power," he said after a long moment. "See this sphere here in the center of the chest? That is its power source. It draws energy from somewhere, I cannot tell where, but the connection has been disrupted. It is running on reserves, and those reserves are almost empty." "Can we recharge it?" asked. "Not directly. Our power systems are too crude. It would be like trying to fill an ocean with a teacup." Thought for a moment, his mind racing through possibilities. "But maybe we can repair the connection, help it draw power from wherever it was getting it before. And if we cannot, then it dies, and we lose the only ally humanity has against whatever else is out there." The next 3 days were the hardest of his life. He barely slept. He barely ate. He spent every waking moment studying the entity, trying to understand its systems, trying to figure out how to help it. Stayed with him most of the time, monitoring sensor readings and helping him document his findings. Organized the rest of the team, making sure they had everything they needed. The work was frustrating. Human technology was so far behind whatever had created the entity that often felt like a caveman trying to fix a computer. He would identify a problem, think he understood it, and then realize that his understanding was completely wrong. But slowly, piece by piece, he began to make progress. The entity's power system was connected to something called subspace. Had heard the term before. Human scientists theorized that subspace was a layer of reality beneath normal space, where different rules applied and faster-than-light travel might be possible. The entity drew energy directly from this layer, converting it into the power it needed to function. The damage had disrupted this connection. It was like a pipe that had been blocked. The energy was still there, waiting to flow, but it had no way to reach the entity. Solution was creative, desperate, and probably insane. He cannibalized 3 quantum drives from the ship's backup systems. Quantum drives were the most advanced technology humanity possessed, allowing ships to bend space and travel faster than light. They operated on principles similar to what the entity used, though on a much smaller scale. He rebuilt the drives, rewiring them and connecting them in ways their designers had never intended. He created a series of adapters, handcrafted from whatever materials he could find, designed to bridge the gap between human technology and whatever the entity used. On the fourth day, he was ready to try. "This is either going to work," he told, "or it is going to blow up the ship." "You really know how to inspire confidence," she replied. Smiled tiredly. "I am an engineer, confidence is not my job, results are." He made the final connection. For a long moment nothing happened. Held his breath, watching the entity, watching his improvised power system, waiting for something to change. Then slowly, the blue patterns on the entity's armor began to brighten. The crystalline structures in its chest started to hum. The dark substance leaking from its wound stopped flowing. The flickering light steadied and grew stronger. "It is working," breathed. "It is actually working." Let out the breath he had been holding. His body was shaking with exhaustion and relief. He had done it. Against all odds, against all logic, he had found a way to help. The entity's eyes opened. Had not known it had eyes. They had been closed, hidden behind the smooth surface of its face. But now they were open and could see that they were not eyes in any human sense. They were pools of light, swirling galaxies contained in small spaces, ancient and vast and utterly alien. They focused on. For a moment nothing happened. The entity simply looked at him and he looked back, too tired and too amazed to be afraid. Then it spoke. The voice did not come from its mouth. It came from everywhere and nowhere, resonating in his ears and his mind at the same time. It was deep and strange and beautiful, carrying meaning directly into his consciousness. "You have restored me." Swallowed hard, his throat was dry, his hands were shaking, he did not know what to say. Yes," he finally managed. "I am an engineer, fixing things is what I do." The entity continued to look at him with those impossible eyes. "I am Sentinel Prime designation 773. I was created by the architects in the first age of this galaxy. For 4.7 billion years, I have protected intelligent life from extinction-level threats." His mind struggled to process what he was hearing. 4 billion years. The entity was older than Earth's sun. It had been protecting life since before humanity's ancestors had climbed down from the trees. "In all that time," the Sentinel continued, "no species has ever attempted to repair me. Most flee when they see me. Others attack, fearing what they do not understand. Some have tried to capture me, to study me, to take me apart and learn my secrets." The Sentinel slowly sat up, its movements graceful despite its massive frame. "But you are the first to simply help." "We did not know what else to do," said honestly. "You saved us. You saved all of humanity. We could not just leave you to die." Many species would have. Self-preservation is a powerful instinct. The unknown is frightening. It would have been easier, safer, to leave me in the debris field and hope that whatever threatened you would not return. Shook his head. "That is not who we are. That is not who I am." The Sentinel studied him for a long moment. Felt as if he was being examined, measured, judged by standards he could not comprehend. "Your repair work is crude," the Sentinel finally said. "By the standards of my creators, it is barely functional. The connections you made are inefficient, the adapters are imperfect, and the power flow is unstable." Felt his face flush with embarrassment. "I am sorry. I did the best I could with what we had." "You misunderstand." The Sentinel's voice carried something that might have been warmth. "Your work is crude, but it is also remarkable. You took technology you barely understand and made it serve a purpose it was never designed for. You worked without sleep, without rest, without any guarantee of success. You solved problems that should have been impossible with nothing but determination and creativity." The Sentinel rose to its full height. Even sitting down had known it was large. Standing, it was massive. Its head nearly touched the cargo bay ceiling. Its presence filled the room like a physical force. "These are rare qualities," the Sentinel said. "In 4.7 billion years, I have encountered millions of species. Only a handful have shown this combination of intelligence, creativity, and selflessness, and none of them were as young as your species." Stood up as well, though he felt small and weak in comparison. "We are just doing what anyone would do." "No, you are not, and that is precisely why you are worthy." Worthy asked, "Worthy of what?" The Sentinel did not answer immediately. Instead, it turned and looked around the cargo bay, taking in the details of the human ship that had saved it. Its eyes lingered on the improvised repairs, on the tools scattered across the floor, on the tired faces of the crew who had gathered to watch. "When I was created," the Sentinel finally said, "the architects gave me a singular purpose. I was to protect developing civilizations from threats they could not face alone. The Devourers, the Void Wraiths, the Entropic Lords, and countless others. Beings and forces that would extinguish intelligent life wherever they found it." Listened in silence. He could feel the weight of history in the Sentinel's words, the billions of years of conflict and protection that lay behind them. "But the architects knew that even I could not be everywhere at once. The galaxy is vast and the threats are many, so they built into me a capacity that I have never used, a choice that I have never made." The Sentinel turned back too, and those ancient eyes seemed to look straight through him. "They gave me the ability to select a partner." The cargo bay went silent. Could hear his own heartbeat, could hear the breathing of his crew, could hear the hum of the ship's systems around them, but nothing else moved or spoke. "A partner," finally asked from somewhere behind. "A bonded companion," the Sentinel explained. "One who would share in my power and my purpose. One who would help me understand the species I protect, who would guide my decisions with their own wisdom and experience. One who would stand beside me against the darkness." Felt something cold settle in his stomach. He thought he understood where this was going, but he did not want to believe it. "In 4.7 billion years," the Sentinel continued, "I have never made this selection. I have encountered countless individuals from countless species. Warriors, leaders, scientists, philosophers. Some were brave, some were brilliant, some were kind, but none of them showed all the qualities the architects deemed necessary." The Sentinel extended its remaining hand, palm up. In its center, a small sphere of light began to form, spinning slowly. It was beautiful, like a tiny star captured and tamed. "Until now." Stared at the sphere of light. His mind was racing, trying to process what was happening, trying to understand what was being offered. He was just an engineer. He fixed broken things. He was not a hero or a warrior or a chosen one. "I do not understand," he said. "Why me? There must be others who are more qualified. Leaders, generals, people who actually know how to fight." "I do not need someone who knows how to fight," the Sentinel replied. "I am capable of destroying fleets. I am capable of battling gods. What I need is someone who can fix things, someone who can solve problems, someone who sees a broken entity floating in space and thinks not of danger or profit, but of how to help." "But I am just ordinary." "No, you are not." The Sentinel's voice was gentle but firm. "You worked for 6 days without rest to save a being you did not understand. You risked your ship and your crew for something that might have been a trap. You treated me not as a threat or a prize, but as someone who needed assistance. These are not the actions of an ordinary person." Looked at the sphere of light, then at the Sentinel, then at his crew gathered around him. His face was pale but excited, looked worried. The other engineers whispered among themselves. "What would happen," asked, "if I accepted?" "You would be enhanced. Your body would be strengthened. Your mind would be expanded. You would gain access to knowledge accumulated over billions of years. You would live for long enough to watch your species grow and spread among the stars. And you would have the power to protect them from threats they cannot yet imagine." "And if I refuse?" Then I will thank you for the repair and continue my mission alone as I have always done. There is no force in this offer, no threat, only invitation. The choice is entirely yours. Thought about everything he knew. He thought about Earth, about the colonies on Mars and the stations around Jupiter. He thought about all the people who had almost died when they came. He thought about his parents, his sister, his friends, all the ordinary people living ordinary lives who had no idea how close they had come to extinction. And he thought about the future, about what else might be out there, waiting in the darkness, about threats that humanity could not face alone. Will I still be me? He asked quietly. Yes, the bond enhances. It does not replace. Your memories, your personality, your connections to others, all of these will remain. You will simply be more than you were before. Took a deep breath. He looked at who gave him a small nod. He looked at who shrugged as if to say your call. He looked at his own hands, the hands that had fixed so many broken things. Could he fix the galaxy? He reached out and touched the sphere of light. The moment his fingers made contact, everything changed. Light exploded around him, through him, inside him. He felt himself dissolving, not physically but conceptually. His sense of self expanded outward like a balloon filling with air, stretching and growing until he thought he would burst. And then the memories came. He saw things that no human had ever seen. The birth of stars, massive explosions of light and energy that created everything that would ever exist. The formation of planets, rocks and gas coming together over millions of years to create worlds. The first stirrings of life, tiny organisms in ancient oceans, beginning the long journey toward intelligence. He saw civilizations rise, species that built great cities and traveled between stars, species that created art and music and philosophy, species that loved and fought and dreamed of things beyond their reach. He saw civilizations fall, wars that consumed entire systems, disasters that wiped out billions of lives, mistakes that could never be undone. He saw the architects, beings of pure energy, vast and incomprehensible, who had existed since the beginning of the universe. They had seeded the galaxy with the potential for life. They had created the sentinels to protect that life. And then they had departed, moving on to whatever existence lay beyond the physical realm. He saw the threats, the devourers, machine intelligences that consumed star systems for fuel, the void wraiths, entities from between dimensions that fed on consciousness itself. The entropic lords, beings who believed the universe was a mistake and worked tirelessly to unmake it. And he saw humanity, his own species, so young and so small against the vastness of the cosmos. They had only left their home planet a few centuries ago. They were still learning to walk among the stars, but there was something special about them, a spark that the Sentinel had recognized, a potential that had not yet been realized. The visions faded, the light dimmed, found himself on his knees gasping for breath. His body was shaking and tears streamed down his face. He felt different, changed. He could not explain how, but he knew that he was no longer the same person he had been moments ago. "The bond is complete," the Sentinel said. Its voice seemed warmer now, more familiar. "You are now my partner, my companion, my friend." Slowly rose to his feet. His senses had changed. He could see details he had never noticed before, the individual molecules in the air, the tiny imperfections in the ship's hull. He could hear things beyond normal human hearing, the hum of power systems, the heartbeats of his crew. He could feel the subtle vibrations of the ship through the deck plating. And he could feel the Sentinel, not just standing beside him but present in his mind like a warm light at the edge of his thoughts. They were connected now, two beings linked across any distance. "I can feel you," said. "In my mind it is strange but not unpleasant. And I can feel you. We are linked now. Where one goes, the other can follow. What one knows, the other can learn. We are no longer alone." Looked down at his hands. They looked the same as before, but he knew they were different. The nanoscale machines that now inhabited every cell of his body were already at work, enhancing and improving him in ways he did not fully understand. Sir's voice was hesitant. Are you okay? Turned to face her. For a moment he struggled to remember how to interact on a human scale. Everything seemed smaller now, less significant. But then the moment passed and he was simply again, just with more. I am fine, he said, and he meant it. Better than fine, actually. I am just going to have a much bigger job from now on. He smiled at her, and she relaxed slightly. So, said his voice carefully neutral, what happens now? Looked at the sentinel. The ancient entity looked back at him. Through their bond, he could feel its answer before it spoke. Now, said, we go home, and then we start protecting humanity, together. The journey back to Earth took 3 weeks. During that time, learned more than he had in his entire previous life. The Sentinel taught him about the galaxy, not just the physical facts, the locations of stars and planets and civilizations, but the deeper truths, the forces at work behind the scenes, the threats that lurked in the darkness, the fragile balance that kept intelligent life alive. Taught the Sentinel about humanity, about their history, their culture, their dreams and fears, about the way they loved and fought and created, about their stubborn refusal to accept defeat, their endless capacity for growth and change. Through their bond, they shared understanding. The Sentinel learned to see humans not as abstract beings to be protected, but as individuals with their own stories and struggles. Learned to see the universe not as an empty void, but as a living thing, full of wonder and danger in equal measure. Watched them from a distance, fascinated and slightly afraid. She had seen change. He was still himself, still the engineer who had led her team, but there was something different about him now. Something vast and ancient looked out through his eyes. Is he still human? She asked one day. The old man considered the question for a long moment. I think so, maybe more human than ever. He has just got a few extra things added on. Does that not scare you? Shrugged, many things scare me. Getting old, dying alone, outliving everyone I care about. But becoming something more. No, that does not scare me, it gives me hope. When they finally reached Earth, they were met by a fleet of coalition warships. News of what had happened had spread. Everyone knew that the salvage ship Dusty Horizon was bringing home something unprecedented. Stood at the observation window as they approached Earth. The planet hung in space, blue and green and beautiful, home to billions of humans who had no idea how much their universe had just changed. Are you ready? The Sentinel asked through their bond. No, replied honestly, but I do not think anyone is ever ready for something like this. That is true, but readiness is less important than willingness. Are you willing? Watched his home planet growing larger in the window. Somewhere down there were his parents, his sister, his friends. Somewhere down there were the people he had sworn to protect. Yes, he said, I am willing. And together, the engineer and the ancient protector descended toward Earth, ready to face whatever the future would bring.